I didn't realize my daughter had erased our family until I saw her wedding invitation sitting in my mailbox. The envelope was thick cream paper with gold lettering, the kind that feels expensive before you even open it. I remember standing by the kitchen counter for a few extra seconds just looking at it while the coffee maker hissed behind me. Outside my window, the October rain tapped softly against the glass, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to excitement. Claire had been distant during most of the wedding planning. Short phone calls, delayed texts, always busy. But I told myself that was normal. Weddings made people stressed. At least that's what everyone kept saying. I dried my hands on a dish towel before carefully opening the envelope. My fingers actually trembled a little. Not from age. From pride. I raised that girl by myself. I worked double shifts cleaning motel rooms outside Columbus for almost 15 years after her father left. I packed school lunches at 5 in the morning. I sat through piano recitals wearing thrift store dresses so she could wear the expensive ones. And now my daughter was getting married. For a moment I let myself feel happy. Real happy. Then I opened the invitation. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore request the honor of your presence at the wedding of Claire Elise Whitmore and Daniel Whitmore Jr. I stared at the card so long the gold letters blurred together. Whitmore. Not Carter. Not even Claire Carter Whitmore. Just Whitmore. Like the name she was born with had been quietly buried somewhere no one could find it. My chest tightened slowly, the way cold settles into a room after someone leaves the door open. I checked the envelope again to make sure there wasn't another card inside. Maybe something had been left out by mistake. Maybe there was a note explaining it. But there was nothing else. No mention of me. No mention of her father. No daughter of Evelyn Carter. Nothing. I sat down at the kitchen table and read the invitation again. Then a third time. The rain outside grew heavier. I could hear water dripping from the gutter near the porch. Finally, I picked up my phone and called Claire. She answered on the fourth ring. Hey, Mom. Her voice sounded distracted, rushed. I tried to keep mine steady. Sweetheart, I just got the invitation. Oh good. Aren't they beautiful? I looked down at the elegant gold script again. Claire, why does it say Whitmore? There was a pause. Small. But long enough. What do you mean? Your last name. Another silence. Then a soft sigh. It just sounds cleaner this way, Mom. Cleaner. I looked around my tiny kitchen. The faded yellow curtains. The magnets on the refrigerator from all the places I could never afford to visit. The framed photo of Claire at 8 years old missing her front teeth and holding a spelling bee trophy almost bigger than she was. Cleaner. I don't understand, I whispered. It's not a big deal, she said quickly. Daniel's family is very traditional. This just makes things simpler. Simpler. Cleaner. Easier. Each word landed softer than shouting would have, and somehow that made it hurt worse. I swallowed hard and forced myself not to cry. Of course, I said quietly. If that's what you want. Mom, please don't make this emotional. Emotional. I pressed my fingertips against the edge of the invitation to stop my hands from shaking. I'm not, I lied. Claire exhaled like she was relieved. Good. I have another meeting with the planner in a few minutes. I'll call you later, okay? But she didn't call later. I sat there alone until my coffee turned cold beside me, staring at the name Whitmore printed where Carter used to belong. And somewhere deep inside me, a terrible thought began to grow. My daughter hadn't just changed her last name before the wedding. She was trying to change where she came from. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise the way I always did. For a few seconds, lying there beneath my old quilt, I forgot about the invitation completely. Then I saw it sitting on the kitchen table through the bedroom doorway, the cream envelope glowing pale in the dim morning light like something waiting for me. I stayed in bed longer than usual. Outside, a garbage truck rumbled down the street while rainwater dripped steadily from the roof. The apartment smelled faintly like coffee grounds and lavender. Detergent. Quiet. Small. Familiar. I used to think Claire found comfort here too. I made myself breakfast anyway. 1 piece of toast. Half a banana. The same breakfast I had eaten almost every morning since retiring from the nursing home 3 years earlier. Habit had become its own kind of company lately. I carried my coffee to the table and tried not to look at the invitation again, but my eyes kept drifting back to it. Whitmore. Such a polished name. It sounded expensive. Like country clubs and summer homes near Cape Cod. Carter sounded ordinary beside it. Working class. Midwestern. The kind of name people forget 5 seconds after hearing it. I thought about the first time I realized Claire hated being associated with where we came from. She was 16, standing in front of the bathroom mirror before school, straightening her hair over and over while practicing a softer accent she had picked up from girls on television. "Can you stop calling me honey in front of people?" she asked suddenly when I drove her to debate club one afternoon. I remember blinking at her across the steering wheel. "What is wrong with honey?" "It sounds," she hesitated. "Small town." I laughed back then because I thought she was embarrassed the way all teenagers get embarrassed. I told myself she would grow out of it. But she never did. When she got accepted into Northwestern University, she stopped introducing herself as Claire Carter from Dayton, Ohio. She became Claire Elise. Just Claire Elise. Sophisticated. Careful. Edited. During her sophomore year, I drove 8 hours to surprise her on Parents' Weekend. I still remember carrying homemade peach cobbler through the crowded student center while searching for her face. When I finally found her sitting with friends near the coffee shop, her smile disappeared the second she saw me. "Mom," she whispered sharply, standing so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "What are you doing here?" I thought she would hug me. Instead, she glanced nervously toward the group behind her. "I wanted to surprise you," I said softly. "I made your favorite." She looked embarrassed. Not happy. Embarrassed. "You should have called first." One of the boys at the table asked if I was her aunt. Claire hesitated just long enough for me to notice. Then she smiled tightly and said, "Family friend." Family friend. I remember pretending not to hear it, pretending not to notice the way her cheeks flushed when I hugged her goodbye in the parking lot an hour later. On the drive home, I cried so hard I had to pull over at a gas station outside Indianapolis because I could barely see the road. But even then I defended her. I told myself college changes people. I told myself she was young. I told myself she loved me underneath all that distance. Now, sitting alone at my kitchen table with that wedding invitation in front of me, all those memories return differently, like puzzle pieces finally fitting together after years of sitting scattered in the wrong box. Claire had not started erasing me before the wedding. She had started years ago. I just loved her too much to see it. 3 days passed before the phone call came. By then, I had almost convinced myself I was overreacting. That was the dangerous thing about being a mother. Even after someone hurts you, part of you still searches for excuses on their behalf. I spent those days cleaning things that were already clean, folding towels, rearranging kitchen drawers, watering the little fern beside the window even though the soil was still damp, anything to keep my mind from circling back to Claire, and that invitation sitting face down on the table. On Thursday afternoon, I was standing on a step stool changing the battery in the hallway smoke detector when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. "Hello." There was a pause before a woman spoke. Her voice sounded polished in a way I could never quite imitate. Calm. Educated. The kind of voice that belonged in expensive restaurants and charity galas. "Is this Evelyn Carter?" "Yes." "Wonderful. This is Margaret Whitmore, Daniel's mother." I climbed down from the stool slowly and sat at the edge of the couch. "Oh," I said softly. "It is nice to finally hear from you." "Likewise." Her tone remained pleasant, though distant. "Claire has spoken so highly of you over the years." Something about that sentence immediately felt strange. Over the years. Claire barely mentioned me lately. I tucked a loose strand of gray hair behind my ear and waited. "I hope I am not interrupting anything," Margaret continued. "Not at all." "Good. I was calling because I wanted to discuss seating arrangements for the rehearsal dinner. Claire mentioned you preferred quieter gatherings." I frowned slightly. "Quieter gatherings?" "Yes. Since everything has probably been difficult after your husband passed." My stomach tightened. "My husband?" "Yes." Margaret hesitated delicately. "Claire told us both her parents passed away several years ago. I assumed." Her voice trailed off completely. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear the ticking of the clock above my stove from clear across the apartment. Tick, tick, tick. "Mrs. Whitmore," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I think there has been some misunderstanding. Silence. Heavy silence. Then Margaret cleared her throat softly. I see. I stared at the family photo sitting on the bookshelf across from me. Claire at 12 years old wearing braces and holding a birthday cake covered in crooked candles. My arm wrapped around her shoulders. Both of us laughing at something outside the frame. I am very much alive, I said quietly. Margaret inhaled sharply on the other end of the line. Claire told us. She stopped again. I could almost hear her trying to reorganize everything she thought she knew about my daughter. I apologize, she said carefully. I did not realize. Neither did I. The thought slipped into my mind before I could stop it. Margaret's voice softened slightly after that. Not warmer exactly. More cautious. Claire said she lost both parents young and was mostly raised by distant relatives. I closed my eyes. Raised by distant relatives. Not by the woman who worked 18-hour shifts to keep the electricity on. Not by the woman who sat through every fever, every school concert, every broken heart. Distant relatives. I pressed my hand against my chest because suddenly it felt difficult to breathe normally. I think perhaps Claire has been trying very hard to fit into your world, I said. My voice sounded strangely calm. Even to me. Mrs. Carter, Margaret began gently. But I could not listen anymore. Because in that moment, I finally understood something that hurt worse than the missing last name. Claire had not only erased our family before the wedding. She had erased me completely. After my conversation with Margaret Whitmore, I sat alone in the apartment until the sun disappeared behind the buildings across the street. I never turned on the television. I never touched the dinner I pulled from the freezer. I just sat there listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional headlights sweeping across my living room walls. There are certain moments in life when the truth rearranges every memory you have ever trusted. That afternoon felt like one of them. Around 8 o'clock, I walked into my bedroom and opened the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed. The hinges creaked softly the way they always had. Inside were 30 years of my life folded into careful little stacks. Old birthday cards. School pictures. Report cards with gold stars in the corners. Claire's first ballet slippers wrapped in tissue paper. I picked up a faded photograph from when she was 7 years old. We were standing outside our first apartment together after I finally saved enough money to move us out of the tiny basement studio we rented after her father left. The building was nothing special. Brown brick. Rusted railings. Laundry machines that only worked half the time. But Claire was smiling so hard in that picture you would think we owned a mansion. I remember the exact day it was taken because she hugged me around the waist afterward and whispered, "We did it, Mom. Back then we were a team." I sat cross-legged on the floor beside the cedar chest and let the memories come one by one. Claire at 11 years old, sitting beside me in a diner booth while I worked late shifts, coloring quietly because I could not afford a babysitter. Claire falling asleep in the passenger seat while I drove home from my second job cleaning offices downtown. Claire crying tears of happiness when her college acceptance letter arrived in the mail. I still remember her running across the kitchen holding the envelope against her chest. "Mom," she kept saying through tears. "Mom, I got in." That night we celebrated with grocery store cupcakes because it was all I could afford until payday. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I am going to give you a better life one day," she promised. Better life. The words echoed strangely now in the quiet apartment. Somewhere along the way, better had started meaning different. Cleaner. More impressive. More acceptable. I thought about all the little changes I ignored over the years because I was proud of her success. The way she slowly stopped inviting me to work events. The way she corrected my grammar in front of people with a smile that looked polite but felt sharp. The way she once laughed nervously when one of Daniel's friends asked where I was from and quickly answered before I could speak. "Oh, nowhere exciting. Nowhere exciting." I looked around my bedroom slowly. The floral curtains I sewed myself 15 years ago. The old radio beside the bed. The stack of library books on my nightstand. My life was not glamorous. It never had been. But every single thing I owned had been earned honestly. Every sacrifice had been made out of love. And suddenly, for the first time since the invitation arrived, something inside me shifted. The sadness was still there. Deep and heavy. But underneath it, Another feeling had begun to grow quietly in its place. Clarity. Claire had spent years pretending her past was something embarrassing she needed to escape from. But I was no longer ashamed of the life I gave her. If my daughter wanted to erase where she came from, then perhaps it was time someone reminded her exactly who carried her there. The bridal fitting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at a boutique hotel downtown. Claire texted me the address 2 days earlier with no message attached. Just the location and time. No smiley face. No looking forward to seeing you. Nothing. I almost did not go. But on Tuesday morning, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror for nearly 20 minutes trying to decide what to wear before finally settling on a navy blue sweater and pearl earrings my mother left me years ago. Curled my hair carefully and put on lipstick even though my hand shook slightly while applying it. Some foolish part of me still hoped things might feel normal once I saw her in person. The hotel sat on a quiet street lined with expensive boutiques and little cafes that charged $8 for coffee. Valet attendants moved polished cars in and out of the circular driveway while women in tailored coats walked through the lobby carrying shopping bags tied with ribbon. I suddenly became very aware of my sensible shoes and department store purse. Inside, the bridal suite smelled like roses and champagne. Soft music floated through the room while bridesmaids stood around holding tiny glasses filled with sparkling water. Claire was near the mirrors surrounded by fabric and white silk. For one brief second when I first saw her, all the hurt inside me disappeared. She looked beautiful. Not because of the dress. Because she was still my little girl underneath all of it. "Claire," I said softly. She turned quickly. Something flickered across her face when she saw me. Not happiness. More like alarm. "Mom," she said quietly as she walked over. She hugged me lightly without fully touching me. The way people hug distant coworkers at retirement parties. "You made it." I smiled anyway. Of course I did. Before I could say anything else, a tall woman with silver jewelry and perfect blonde hair approached us holding a clipboard. "Claire, the florist is here asking about centerpiece revisions." Then she noticed me standing there. "Oh," she said politely. "Are you with alterations?" For half a second no one spoke. I looked at Claire. Waiting for her to laugh and say, "No, this is my mother." Instead, Claire forced a thin smile and touched my arm lightly. "This is Evelyn." "Evelyn. Not Mom. Just Evelyn." The woman nodded distractedly. "Lovely to meet you." Then she turned back toward Claire immediately. "The Whitmores are asking if the rehearsal dinner seating has been finalized." The Whitmores. Everywhere I looked that afternoon, I saw the same polished world Claire had been trying so desperately to belong to. The bridesmaids talked about ski trips in Aspen and summer homes. In Martha's Vineyard, one woman complained about private school tuition costing nearly $50,000 a year, as if she were discussing the weather. I stood near the back of the room pretending to study flower arrangements while Claire moved effortlessly through conversations that sounded nothing like the life we used to live together. At one point, Margaret Whitmore arrived wearing a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. She greeted everyone warmly before finally approaching me. "Evelyn," she said with careful politeness, "it is so nice to see you again." Again. Not finally meeting the bride's mother. Not family. Just again. Claire avoided my eyes almost the entire afternoon. Every time someone asked about her childhood or family history, she redirected the conversation smoothly somewhere else. I noticed it constantly once I started paying attention. Like watching someone quietly erase fingerprints from glass. By the time the fitting ended, my chest felt hollow with exhaustion. Claire walked me toward the elevator afterward, her heels clicking softly across the marble floor. "Thank you for coming," she said quickly. I looked at her for a long moment. At the carefully styled hair. The flawless makeup. The expensive dress she had once dreamed of as a little girl flipping through bridal magazines beside me on our old couch. "You do not have to hide me, Claire," I said quietly. Her face tightened instantly. "Mom, please." "Not here." The elevator doors opened between us with a soft chime. And for the first time in my life, my daughter looked at me less like family and more like a problem she needed to manage. 2 days after the bridal fitting, I was sitting at my kitchen table paying bills when my laptop chimed with a new email notification. I almost ignored it. Most days it was grocery coupons or reminders from the pharmacy. But something made me look. The sender read, Harper Events Planning Team. For a second I frowned in confusion. Then I remembered the woman with the clipboard from the hotel. I clicked the email open slowly. Claire. Attached is the updated seating layout and donor placement chart for rehearsal dinner. Approval. Below the message sat a PDF attachment. My stomach tightened immediately. They had sent it to the wrong Evelyn. I should have closed it right there. I know that. But when your own daughter spends years turning you into a stranger, curiosity starts to feel a lot like survival. I opened the file. The rehearsal dinner was being held at the Whitmore Country Club outside Chicago. 200 guests. Investors. Business partners. Family friends. Every table carefully arranged according to status and connections. I scrolled through page after page of seating assignments until I finally found my name near the bottom. Table 17. Rear section beside catering access hallway. I stared at the screen for several seconds. Table 17 was not even inside the main dining room. It sat near the service doors where waiters entered carrying trays. Across from my name there was no family designation. Other guests had titles beneath their names. Cousin of the groom. Aunt of the bride. College roommate. Family friend. Beside mine there was nothing at all. Just Evelyn Carter. Like someone attending out of obligation. I kept scrolling. My chest felt strangely numb now instead of hurt. Numbness can become its own kind of protection after enough disappointment. Then I reached the final page. Internal notes. Please keep Evelyn Carter seated away from Whitmore donors and senior board members. I blinked slowly. Read it again. Then lower down. Bride prefers minimal discussion of maternal background during formal introductions. Maternal background. Not mother. Background. Like I was something embarrassing hidden inside a closet. My fingers trembled slightly against the keyboard. Another note underneath caught my eye. Bride requested no childhood family photos displayed during rehearsal slideshow. I leaned back in my chair and looked around the apartment slowly. The framed pictures on my walls suddenly felt heavier somehow. Claire at her high school graduation. Claire carving pumpkins at 12 years old. Claire asleep on my shoulder during a 4th of July fireworks show when she was little. All those years. All those memories. Reduced to something she needed removed. Before wealthy people arrived with champagne glasses and business cards. I should have cried. Instead, I sat there very still while the afternoon sunlight moved quietly across the floorboards. After a while, I opened the old cedar chest again and began pulling things out carefully. A stack of report cards tied with ribbon. Letters Claire mailed home during college. Receipts from violin lessons I could barely afford. Christmas photographs taken in our tiny apartment with paper snowflakes taped to the windows because we could never afford decorations from department stores. I placed everything neatly across the table one piece at a time. Not out of anger. Out of memory. Because suddenly I understood something clearly. Claire had spent years rewriting the story of her life. But the truth still existed in photographs. In handwriting. In late-night shifts and unpaid bills and grocery store birthday cakes. The truth existed in me. My phone buzzed just before sunset. Claire's name appeared across the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. Hi, Mom, she said carefully. Did you get any strange emails today? I looked down at the open PDF glowing softly on my laptop screen. Then at the photographs spread across my kitchen table. Yes, I said quietly. I think I finally did. Claire arrived at my apartment the next evening just after 7. I heard her heels coming down the hallway before she knocked. 3 quick taps. Controlled. Impatient. I opened the door slowly. She stood there wearing a long camel coat with her hair pulled into a sleek knot at the back of her head. Everything about her looked polished. Expensive. Untouchable. But her eyes moved past me immediately toward the kitchen table behind my shoulder where the photographs and papers were still spread out exactly where I had left them. Can I come in? She asked quietly. I stepped aside without answering. Claire walked into the apartment slowly. The same apartment where she once built blanket forts in the living room and ate macaroni and cheese at the tiny counter while doing homework. Funny how a place can hold so much love for one person and so much embarrassment for another. She removed her coat carefully and draped it over a chair before turning toward me. You were not supposed to receive that email. I nodded once. I figured that out. Silence settled between us. Thick. Uncomfortable. Claire crossed her arms lightly. Mom, this whole thing has gotten blown out of proportion. Has it? My voice surprised even me. Calm. Very calm. She exhaled sharply through her nose the way she used to do as a teenager whenever she thought I was being unreasonable. Daniel's family is different from ours. Their world is different. There are expectations. So you told them I was dead? Her jaw tightened instantly. I did not say it like that. How did you say it, Claire? She looked away toward the window. I just simplified things. Simplified. The same word again. As if removing your mother from your life was no different than cleaning out a cluttered closet. I pulled out a chair and sat down slowly. Come here. Claire hesitated before finally walking over. I picked up one of the old photographs from the table and handed it to her. She stared down at it without speaking. It was the picture from outside our first apartment. She was 7 years old wearing a pink winter coat 2 sizes too big, because I bought it secondhand from a church donation sale. Do you remember this place? I asked quietly. Mom. The radiator barely worked during winter. We used to sleep with socks on because it got so cold at night. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Please do not do this. But I kept going softly. You used to sit on the kitchen counter while I made grilled cheese sandwiches on that little stove with the burner that tilted sideways. A long silence followed. Claire finally sat down across from me. She looked tired suddenly. Younger somehow beneath all the expensive polish. You do not understand, she whispered. Then explain it to me. She rubbed her hands together slowly before speaking. Everything matters to people like the Whitmores. Schools, family names, connections, the right neighborhoods, the right background. They judge everything. And what exactly did they judge about me? Claire looked down at the table immediately. That hurt more than any answer could. I worked my whole life, I said softly. I never drank, never gambled, never abandoned you. I spent 30 years taking care of sick people at the nursing home while raising you alone. What part of that embarrassed you so badly? Claire's eyes filled suddenly, but she blinked the tears away almost angrily. You would not understand how hard I worked to get into that world. No, I said quietly. I understand perfectly. Because suddenly I did. Claire had spent so many years climbing toward acceptance that she started treating love like extra weight she needed to leave behind. She thought survival meant reinvention. She thought dignity came from distance. But sitting there across from my daughter that night, looking at the shame written all over her face, I realized something she still did not understand. The people who truly belong somewhere do not erase their mothers to get there. The rehearsal dinner took place on a cold Friday evening beneath crystal chandeliers and soft golden lighting at the Whitmore Country Club. Every surface inside the ballroom gleamed. White roses overflowed from tall centerpieces. Waiters in black jackets carried silver trays filled with sparkling drinks, while a pianist played quietly near the fireplace. The entire room smelled faintly of expensive perfume and polished wood. I arrived 10 minutes early wearing the dark green dress I bought 3 years ago for my retirement party. It was simple, modest. The kind of dress no one remembers after you leave a room. Claire noticed me almost immediately from across the ballroom. Even from a distance, I could see the tension move through her shoulders. Daniel stood beside her speaking with several older men in tailored suits, but his smile faded slightly the moment he followed her gaze toward me. For a second I considered turning around and leaving. Not because I was ashamed, because I was tired. Tired of feeling like an unwanted guest in my own daughter's life. But then I remembered the notes inside that PDF. Maternal background. Keep her away from donors. I straightened my shoulders and kept walking. Margaret Whitmore greeted me near the entrance with careful politeness. Evelyn, she said warmly enough for nearby guests to hear. You look lovely tonight. Thank you. Her eyes lingered on me for half a second longer than necessary. Not cruel. Curious. Since our phone call, I think she had been quietly trying to understand which version of Claire was real. The ballroom slowly filled as conversations blended together beneath soft music and clinking glasses. I remained at table 17 exactly where they placed me, near the service hallway. Every few minutes a waiter pushed through the doors carrying trays of food, while cold air drifted briefly into the room from the kitchen beyond. It would have humiliated me once. But strangely it no longer did. Because humiliation only works when you agree with it. Dinner began shortly after 7. Speeches followed dessert. Daniel's father stood first, thanking everyone for celebrating the joining of two respected families. Then several friends spoke about Daniel's success, ambition, and future. Claire smiled beautifully through all of it. Controlled. Elegant. Perfect. Finally Margaret rose from her chair holding a champagne glass delicately between manicured fingers. And of course, she said with a graceful smile, we are so grateful Claire entered our lives. She carries herself with such grace and refinement. Truly a woman raised with remarkable values. Around the room guests nodded approvingly. I saw Claire lower her eyes modestly beside Daniel. Something inside me became very still then. Not angry. Still. I stood up slowly before I could change my mind. The movement was quiet, but enough people noticed that conversation softened almost immediately. Claire's face lost all color the second she saw me standing there. I apologize, I said calmly, my voice carrying farther than I expected across the ballroom. I normally do not enjoy public speaking. Nervous laughter fluttered politely around the room. I looked toward Claire gently. But hearing everyone talk tonight about refinement and upbringing reminded me of something. The ballroom fell silent. Claire stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. I continued softly. When Claire was 9 years old, she wanted violin lessons more than anything in the world. I could not afford them at the time. So for almost 2 years I cleaned office buildings overnight after finishing my shifts at the nursing home. No one moved. Even the waiters seemed frozen near the service doors. I remember sleeping in my car during winter storms between jobs because driving home wasted too much gas. I smiled faintly at the memory. But Claire practiced every night in our tiny apartment until the neighbors banged on the walls. A few people chuckled quietly. Daniel was staring at Claire now instead of me. I suppose, I said gently, that elegance looks different depending on where you first learned sacrifice. Silence settled heavily across the ballroom after that. Claire looked down at her hands. Daniel's expression had changed completely. And for the first time since this whole painful thing began, I realized I no longer needed my daughter's approval to stand proudly inside my own story. The wedding took place the following afternoon beneath a white canopy overlooking a lake just outside Chicago. The sky was pale blue, the kind of crisp autumn day people describe as perfect in photo albums years later. Guests arrived in dark suits and elegant dresses while violin music drifted softly across the water. Everything looked beautiful from a distance. That was the strange thing about appearances. They often held together long after the truth underneath had already cracked. I sat quietly near the back row exactly where my name card directed me. Alone. Around me, people spoke in low polished voices about business deals, vacation homes, and private schools. Every now and then someone glanced toward me with curiosity after recognizing me from the rehearsal dinner speech. Not judgment. Curiosity. Claire arrived 10 minutes before the ceremony began. The moment she stepped onto the aisle, a hush moved through the crowd. She looked stunning in her gown. Timeless. Graceful. For one painful second, tears filled my eyes anyway. Because no matter how deeply your child hurts you, part of your heart still remembers holding them when they were small. Claire passed my row without looking at me. But Daniel did. Standing beside the officiant, he briefly lifted his eyes toward where I sat. His expression looked different now. Thoughtful. Unsettled. During the ceremony, I noticed little things no one else probably saw. The way Claire's smile occasionally faltered whenever family was mentioned. The way Daniel seemed quieter than before. The way Margaret Whitmore kept glancing toward me during the vows as though she were slowly reevaluating everything she believed about the woman her son was marrying. Afterward, guests gathered inside the reception hall while waiters carried trays of champagne beneath hanging lights and white floral arrangements. I stayed only long enough to congratulate the newly married couple politely. Claire hugged me stiffly near the dance floor while photographers moved around us snapping pictures. "Thank you for coming," she whispered carefully, as if speaking too honestly might crack something fragile between us. I looked at her for a long moment. Up close, she suddenly seemed exhausted beneath all the makeup and elegance. "You do not have to spend the rest of your life pretending you came from somewhere else," I said softly. Her eyes filled instantly. But she looked away before the tears could fall. Daniel approached us then, and for the first time since meeting him, he extended his hand toward me warmly. "Mrs. Carter," he said quietly, "I am very glad you came this weekend." Mrs. Carter. Not Evelyn. Not distant relative. Carter. The name landed gently in my chest like something finally returning home. I left the reception shortly after sunset while the music still echoed faintly behind me. Back at my apartment later that night, I opened the cedar chest one final time and removed a small white envelope I had prepared earlier that morning. Inside, I placed copies of old photographs, Claire's kindergarten drawing signed, "I love my mommy forever," and her original birth certificate with the name Claire Elise Carter printed clearly across the top. Then I added one short handwritten note. "You spent years trying to bury where you came from, but love is not something shame should erase." I mailed the envelope the next morning before church. Weeks passed after the wedding. Claire called twice but never left a voicemail. Daniel sent me flowers on Thanksgiving with a handwritten card, thanking me for raising a woman who understood sacrifice, even if she had temporarily forgotten it herself. And slowly, for the first time in years, peace returned to my little apartment. Not because my daughter apologized, not because everything magically healed, but because I finally understood something important. A family name only matters if the people carrying it remember the love that built it in the first place. And no matter how hard Claire tried to hide from her past, she would always carry a part of me inside her. Whether she admitted